You can work with different singers in different ways, because now you're not working on biases and your beliefs, but you're working on the principles underneath the voice, like almost like realities of how things work underneath. And often learning those is a means to reduce bias. Yes, chest voice, singing with lots of chest voice can hurt you if this scenario occurs. But it won't if this scenario occurs. But most people aren't seeing that.
All right, yeah, this is deep. This is We Help Singers, a podcast about matching singers with teachers who actually fit how they learn. The voice teaching industry works on a myth that the best teachers can teach anyone. We're here to challenge that, so we're having conversations with voice teachers about how they actually teach, not their marketing pitch, but the real stuff. And so for the first episode, I'm excited. I'm starting with someone I've known for years. Since the late 80s, in fact. It's Chris Johnson. We used to host the Naked Vocalist podcast together and spent roughly 14 years eating wedding cake while singing Jason Mraz for first dances. Since then, he's gone on deep into principle-based teaching, resonance, movement, and he's honest about what he can't do. He involves singers in the decision-making process and measures success by whether students can solve problems he never even showed them. We cover bias in teaching, why movement unlocks stuck voices, and what autonomy actually looks like when a student owns their instrument. Let's go with Chris. Well, here we are. Chris Johnson in the house. Whose house?
I don't know whose house. It's a long way away, isn't it? So from what we've been used to in the past, it's like at the end of a long table.
Yeah.
I feel like Henry VIII.
We used to just sit on a sofa and chill. Henry VIII.
You pass the salt.
Yes.
You know, it's that sort of that long. But it's lovely. I'm enjoying it in here. It's a bit more upgraded since the podcast days.
Yeah, we got the cameras, we got the mics, the lights.
Thank you.
A lot has happened since those days. When was the last time we did a podcast?
Just before you left me, essentially. Left for America. The land of opportunity.
Why?
I'm still here, doing my thing,
trundling
without
along.
you. But no, I can't. The last one was COVID.
Yeah, to try and help people through that mess. But that was
It's like an age ago.
Yeah, it really was. 4 years.
Yeah, 4 years.
But with that though, I mean, there's been, so I would say probably 2018 or 19 since we last did anything of substance.
Yeah, anything worthwhile.
Yeah, and that's debatable. But but no, there must be some things that have happened in the singing world since then. We could talk about our own personal lives, but I'm sure that's not as valuable to singers listening. So what about the?
Just email me.
What about that though? What about you in your teaching life as a teacher and how things have changed since over the past 5 years?
Well, it's been massive. COVID was the prompt for it actually, because a lot of the world moved on to online. So my business sort of went partly it went online singing lessons. And actually, although you might think online singing lessons, just the skills you need to learn are to do partly with technology. Like how do you deliver a good one and don't have rubbish sound and stuff like that? How do you hear people well and direct people on the other end of the line to have the just enough text so they don't just throw shit out the window, but you can get a good sound. So there's that aspect. But actually, what it requires you to do is sort of change your pedagogy a little bit as well. So that sort of, for me, it prompted a very different approach, because now I can't just stand there and say, look at your feet, look at your hips, and look at the way you're standing. Now there's an extra level of like assessment that you'd need to do. So my sort of singing coaching started to go even deeper into that direction of like, how do I assess somebody through visual, which is challenging online, but also questions and then patterns and stuff? How do I assess somebody really well so that the online experience is actually valuable? So that's kind of went down that road. But what happened in COVID as well, for what it seems like singing teachers who are teaching amateurs and beginners as well. Professionals is different because that industry died, didn't it, during COVID? But a lot of the kids that were staying at home, they were taking singing lessons more than they would have when COVID wasn't around. So what I found was a load of singing teachers that were...
They weren't taking singing lessons.
No,
you
they
say?
were,
Right,
yeah.
right, right.
So because they were at home all the time.
course.
So the parents were like, "Oh, I've got to keep my kids busy and educate, at least enjoying this time at home." So it seemed like for a certain singing teacher, there was actually quite a lot of stuff happening. Online teaching was growing, and they would get a few more clients because of all of these extracurricular activities, because kids weren't at school and stuff like that. So I noticed that there was a huge amount of teachers coming to me with a bit of extra cash, kind of saying, "Okay, yeah, I'd love to do some training." So my world since COVID, although I teach 2 days a week singers at the moment, but the other 3 days a week just went straight to teachers during COVID, and so I sort of doubled down on that, really.
So that's really interesting, because looking at the Facebook forums, the voice groups, around that time, I remember there's a lot of people talking about, as you say, the setup, the logistics of teaching online, and that seemed to be the biggest issue. And then you'd have some people say, "Oh, I can't even really hear the people. I can't hear on this." So how much value is there in online lessons? And clearly there's a number of different perspectives on this. But what is yours on that? That's really interesting what you said about you change your methods to suit. I guess it's an assessment.
Yeah.
What have you got to say about that?
Well, the assessment has to be a bit more cooperative, which actually has benefits, by the way, to the learner, right? So if you can't see exactly what's going on, sometimes I used to do lessons on the phone, can't see anything. So I'm relying on the feedback of the singer all the time. And there is a knock-on effect to that, because if you rely on feedback, you are involving the singer in decision making, right? So actually, it's not just I listen to you, I tell you what to do, and you just do it. What you inadvertently get is we agree together what's good and what's not so good. So that's part of getting round the online thing. But when you involve any person that's taking therapy or instruction, when you involve them in decision making, their learning enhances, because they start to feel like they have autonomy, they can own their own issues, they can solve their own issues, their feelings aren't invalidated. That builds trust in you. Before you know it, everything's going better. So as much as some people might say online doesn't work as well because of the technical issues, that may be true sometimes. Internet is fantastic these days, like the connection. Wi-Fi is unbelievable compared to what it was 5 years ago. But yeah, when you can involve singers in the decision-making process through this sort of assessments that I create, I teach this to singing teachers all the time, then before you know it, the cooperative learning aspect comes in. And then, one of the criticisms of learning in the past has been sort of the hierarchical one. You're like, I'm the master, you're the student. And what I tell you, you do it, right? But there's lots of research in all different things, like in anything from massage to singing teaching, is that when there's shared decision making, the recommendations you give to people are more likely to land and more likely to be trusted, because you have validated them in the process. So I've sort of happened upon that from COVID, and now COVID's gone and I go to teaching people in person. I keep that model because it was born from working online more, but the benefit to the singer is regardless of whether we're in person or online. So that's how my pedagogy really took a turn.
And it's really the conversation of who knows. A few years ago, I think it was, I had a conversation with one particular student. When you say, "Oh, did you do you understand what I'm saying? Do you understand? Do you understand that?" And he said, and if you ever listen to this, you know it's him. He said, "How do I know? How do I know if I understand what you're saying?" Right, but that's the ongoing. Just it's unexplained. How do I know if what I've said means the same thing to you? And you're able to then perceive that and digest it in a way that's going to be helpful to you. It's a rabbit hole that you probably don't want to go down too often. But I guess what you're saying is that if as long as you agree on certain aspects or certain measurements of achievement or success or development progression, this is what. Okay, so when you just did that thing, was there anything that indicated to you that it was a good thing? Because it did to me as well.
Yeah.
Is that essentially what you're saying? Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Mm.
And you do have to be accommodating. So when it would first start out, it would be like, it might be as vague as, how was that?
Mm.
And then you're relying on feedback. And some people are very in tune with their own sort of feelings and sensations, and they'd be really good at going, that felt this, that felt that. Some people are so in tune with that it becomes crippling. How was that? And then it'd be an incredibly detailed report, and I'm like, shit, this is getting in the way. This is
Mm.
far too detailed, right? So then what we have to do is we have to bring it back to, if I can give you a more simple parameter to measure things by, and sometimes I have to give people a frame of reference, and sometimes that can be negative practice, right? So if this is squeezing and this is breathy, and most people can identify how different that feels, not only in the throat, but when you squeeze like that, you can feel your belly squeezing as well, like lifting a piano. And doing that, you feel no resistance to air leaving you. It feels different in the throat. They also sound very different. It's going to be fairly impossible to find somebody who can't identify some form of difference between those three things, or two things, and then the one in the middle, which is, let's say it's neither breathy nor pressed. It's sort of the thing that we live in singing most of the time. So sometimes what we need to do is we need to give people the parameters, the extremes of the scale, and then we can give them an assessment and say, well, in that context, is there a difference from you doing that singing thing or that singing thing that makes you go this direction or that direction? So with assessment, depending on the singer, how we're doing it, if it's online, whatever, if I want to involve them in a rich learning situation where they are involved in their own decisions, that helps them learn more about themselves. Yeah, sometimes we do have to simplify, not go down this rabbit hole of vague questions, but give them something to answer that's simple. And then when you do that, you can refine that assessment down to something that is simple, is clear, but it helps the singer to identify what is working
Mm.
and what isn't working against a few things, which is, again, in the old model, it would be, yes, do that, that's great. And although if the singing teacher was very balanced and excellent, that would still be okay, a model way to do it. But at the end of the day, you are being directed by the taste of somebody else, what somebody else believes to be healthy, good. And that involves a lot of bias. And then you're at the mercy of whether that teacher's bias fits your bias. Like, if they love soul singing and you want to be a soul singer, then maybe that bias works. Yeah, do more of that. Okay, I'll do more of that. Then you might sound more soulful because the person with the bias has a soul bias. But often you don't get that in singing teaching. You'll get somebody with a classical bias teaching a soul singer and saying, yes, that's great. And before you know it, you get this funny hodgepodge of are you soul or are you classical? It all sounds a bit messed up. So that's when this model doesn't quite work. But if you engage in the shared decision making, the fact that that teacher was classical and you're singing soul, it matters a bit less, because it's not just them saying, you do that, and my bias is guiding those decisions. It's actually, we're doing this together. And sometimes I can disagree with what you say because I say that doesn't feel or sound good. But we have to put that shared learning on the table first for that to be possible. And then we get a lot less bias in teaching, and then we get singers to actually develop in the way they want to. Which does allow you to work with more people. Do you know what I mean? It allows you to help more people because you're trying your best through shared decision making to not just involve your taste in the decision you're making for somebody else. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it's so many things. Is there one question is there ever a point where a bias is good?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if somebody is looking to fit the standards of an industry or a style, for example, somebody who doesn't have a strong experience in a style is directing somebody to sound a certain way, it's quite feasible that they'll get the stylistic judgment wrong, but still believe that that's the right thing to do. But then somebody who's say, if you're getting signed by a record label, somebody listens to you and goes, oh, it just sounds a bit And then they give you a word that's probably highly shit and useless, right? Can you just make it more? And then just some crappy word, right? And then you go away going, yes. And then you have no idea what's being said. But that's just another conversation, isn't it, right? Feedback from the record industry. However, when you have somebody who is very strongly leaning towards a style, they can assist you into fitting in with the sort of the standards, almost sometimes the non-negotiable things that come with sounding a certain way. So yeah, teachers can very much specialize. That could be like in riffs, it can be in R&B, certainly in classical. You know, classical is so defined by such often quite specific parameters that you do really need a great classical singer to sound classical, don't you? It's not like you're going to sound really wonderful opera singer when your singer's never sung opera, right? We can pretty much assume that. So that's when the bias does come very, very good. So yeah, there are situations when bias is good, and bias can never be removed. So we have to acknowledge that. We're going to limit, like I try and limit my biases as much as possible, but I can never remove them. And that's why maybe the people that I work with and the people that I serve best, it's always going to funnel into something at some point.
What is that then? What is it? So what you're saying is that you understand that your bias will always be there to some extent, and there's not a lot you can do about that, and that's okay. Because is that so? Are we talking about a difference between a bias and parameters that are in place because of external, so the genre itself? Or if you want to sing soul, then this isn't me pushing my bias onto you. This is what you kind of have to do because people are going to expect to hear you a certain way. There's a difference there between the expectation or the requirement for the genre or whatever it may be versus your unknown bias that you're just or unknowingly pressing onto other people. Would you?
Well, yeah. So that's part of what I do with vocal coaches. In the first module of a program that I do, in the first module, it is acknowledging your bias.
Okay. Can you give an example? So what have you come across?
Well, biases come from sort of beliefs, like how you believe, like what you believe. Like if you believe singing loudly will hurt you, if you believe chest voice is the root of injury, right, which loads of singing teachers do, belting will hurt you. Like that's a belief, that's a bias. And even though you might still believe that, I think as a teacher that you still need to put that on the table. Because if you believe that, that will make a decision for somebody in the future. And so it's that belief is going to guide those singers into the same place, right? And let's say that if you believe that strongly, like if you believe belting is bad or it's going to injure you, for example, it's likely that your singers, if they stay with you long enough, are going to start to sound the same, right? They're going to lose the colour of chest voice. They might sing light and heady. They might be very flexible, yes, and you might be going, great, because that's my bias. I hear this flexibility and I think it's amazing. But when somebody, like when consumers listen to the music, like the people who love the music and listen to it, they might go, oh, it's just not delivering. Oh, it's just not delivering. But the teacher's like, yes, but it's healthy though. And you see this all the time. The teacher's guided by that bias of, but this is good though, because I'm making sure they don't hurt themselves. But the point of the song is lost. The purpose of this singing is gone. And you can belt, you can use chest voice, you can sing incredibly strong stuff and be healthy, right? So it's my job to help singers and singing teachers explore that, the fact that you have this bias, but let me just help you find something that allows you to acknowledge that bias. And also, if I can along the way show you elements of belting that aren't going to injure you, and that would be evidence backed, and I can demonstrate it, then we can start to overcome biases like that. And then we won't get like the homogenizing of singers in our studio. We won't get singers where somebody might hear them and go, oh, you've trained with Chris, I can hear it. That's like, for me, that's one of probably the worst sentences you can get. Oh, I can hear you've trained with Chris. Oh shit, I've homogenized all the singers. I've made them all sound the same. And maybe for a certain group of people that might be good. But for a certain group of people, they've taken your bias and they've just blindly accepted it. But there will be a bunch of singers who don't blindly accept it as well. and they'll be the ones that don't come back or argue with you constantly, or they stay with you, but they never seem to trust your decisions because really the biases are clear to them and to you, but they just feel like they have to stick around. It happens all the time. Singers who don't really take on the advice because truly they can often feel like a bias is being imposed upon them. And then the reasons why that might be for the teacher could be anything. It could be their own tuition from years ago. It could be literature from many years ago demonizing stuff that people can do perfectly well today, right? It could be how they injured themselves in the past, and they would stop anybody else from doing that in the future, which is an honourable mission. But from you see with people with vocal injuries, most of the time it's not the technique that did it. It's just in that moment, it was the straw that broke the camel's back. But most of the time, it's lots of other factors, right? But many times, teachers will attach themselves to the technique of it, and that leads their biases in the future to train every singer. So yeah, and that's sort of when you're talking about specialism or generalism in singing teaching, if you try and acknowledge your biases and actually not let them lead the situation as often as they maybe have done in the past, then you do generalize a bit, right? You are able to actually expand out into different genres. You can work with different singers in different ways because now you're not working on biases and your beliefs, but you're working on the principles underneath the voice, like almost like realities of how things work underneath. And often learning those is a means to reduce bias. Yes, chest voice, singing with lots of chest voice can hurt you if this scenario occurs. But it won't if this scenario occurs. But most people aren't seeing that.
All right. Yeah. Well, this is deep.
Yeah, it's gone a bit further than I intended. Let me just take a sip of tea.
We're only 7 minutes
I might pour it over my head.
No, but I'm just trying. I'll be honest with you. I'm trying to unravel everything because there's so many good things in there. And if I can, so I don't forget anything. So first of all, the biases that someone may hold when they go into teaching. I want to talk at some point about how much that relates to the goal of the teacher and how important it is for the teacher to actually have this goal that is clear enough for them to articulate to the student in real time. But I suppose it can definitely evolve the goal itself. But I wonder how much that is related to if I have this particular goal, and my goal may be that I want people to sound like this particular singer. And as long as I'm clear about that goal with my singers before they come in, is that a problem? But then the step down from there is, as you said, well, I suppose that's a good place to start. What is your goal then? Because it may sound obvious, but you at one point you said, we don't want to sound, sound breathy over here as an extreme, and then we've got the sort of clear sound over here, and maybe a strong chest voice, and maybe a belt, and we can feel what these different sensations feel like. But that the underlying goal of the teacher and how that plays into the decisions that are made in the lesson room. Do you have any thoughts on that and how important it is for a teacher to understand what their mission is for the pathway in that lesson, to how it then lends itself to all of these different choices that you make and the biases that you might have? And is it a problem to have a bias if it supports the goal of the lesson?
Yeah, no, there's not. And I think when it comes to let's say that you've been in the market for 30 years or something. Right, you've been teaching for a long time, and actually you're known for something, and now we're online. Anybody from around the world can contact you because you're known for something, and you spend all day doing that thing. That's fantastic. That's fantastic, right? Because it allows like you could call it a bias, and maybe when we say bias, it sounds negative. I don't want to necessarily put an entirely negative swing on it at all. It's your specialism. A specialism, you could see it as a form of bias, but one that becomes incredibly useful. And one that, because you really enjoy it, you invest a lot of time and you generate a lot of like pattern recognition and intuition around that particular subject. And there's a few subjects maybe that I have a bias for, or rather a specialism as well. And maybe there's 30% of the clients that I work with who start to show that they are looking for that sort of direction. And I'm like, oh, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Chance to get nerdy, or chance to get a little bit specialist here, right? So, which is pretty cool. But one of the things that I find is most important is if you want to subvert your bias and help more people, right? To help them to preserve something about what they like, right? Because that's really important, right? What do you want to sound like? It if you're directed by me the whole way, then when it comes to creating some form of uniqueness and expression, you're just going to rely on me to tell you. But that's the goal of a singer, is to communicate their message from the heart, and that needs to be a decision that you make, right? So we do have to subvert biases, I think, to make that happen. But there are some things that singers, regardless of anything, they will have an experience. And so one of those things is how you use the posture. I like physical movement, gestures, posture. They affect the voice in so many ways. And you're not going to find a singer whose body doesn't contribute to their voice. Obviously, that's impossible, right? Your body contributes to your voice. That means that working with physical movement applies in all styles to everybody. So there you can say, I teach everyone. Well, yeah, you kind of do in that sense. But no, what that means is that allows you to engage with anyone. Not I teach everyone. It allows me to engage with anyone. And it allows me to start somewhere that where your style is out the window. Don't care. It wouldn't matter. And the reason why I know that is because I've traveled the world and done this to groups, massive groups of people. There are thousands of people in that number of N, right? In the sample group of people that I've worked with. So it's almost impossible for someone to not see an effect from a physical movement on their voice. Right? That's what I've learned. So therefore, I can subvert my biases a bit, and I'll go, what do you want to do? What's the goal? What's the one thing you wish just would work a little better in your voice, right? We can narrow it down. And one of the first ways I engage that is with movement, because with movement, we don't have to have any scales. We don't need any musical ability. The teacher doesn't need to play the scales. If you're a teacher and you're like, I don't play piano. It's like, yeah, great. Work with the body then, because you don't need anything. All the singer needs is a song. And then when you engage movement, it starts to fan itself out. You start to see things that work well and don't work well. And from there, it just starts to present itself into different pathways and opportunities, right? So movement for me was one of the ways in which I could subvert my own biases. I could involve the singer in feedback, which shared decision-making. But for other teachers and also other singers, movement is a way to also obliterate their beliefs, right? Because sometimes a singer comes to you, says, I have a problem. I could say, I think your problem is because you're doing that. And that's my bias, right? But another reason why I followed movement initially was because of my biases in teaching were because of what I learned from other people. So they weren't my discoveries. They were the discoveries of other people in training. But of course, there'll be the situations, well, you've taught me that, but how do they do that then? Or you taught me that, and they're clear. Well, why don't they get burnt by that? And there'll always be an answer for that in a hierarchical master-student, right? There'll always be a good answer for that, but those answers usually, they're not very good. They're just preserving the technique, right? But what you do is then when you look at movement, and you look at how you think you should sing, for example, I must keep my larynx low, or I must keep my ribs this way, or I must do this to my belly. When we do movement, we rule a lot of that stuff out. It's sometimes impossible for someone to do those techniques when they're moving. And then it becomes an opportunity to not subvert my biases, but subvert the singers. So you reckon you need to pull your belly in, or you reckon you need to push your belly out? I'm going to test that, right? By using a movement that won't allow you to do it. Well, that's not exactly how I say it because, giving the game away. But that's my thought. Mm-hmm. And then when we do it, it's like, how's the belly doing now? And they're like, I haven't really thought about it. And I was like, bingo. So what's that telling you about what you need to do with your belly? Do I need to do anything? Well, you tell me. Because if you're not doing anything and you're getting better, what is that telling you? And it's telling, hopefully they'll say, Is it telling me I don't need to pull my belly in or push it out or whatever it is? Do I need to do that anymore? No. You should forget about it. So the movement, that's a way to get around bias in the whole situation. And then before you know it, the singer is sort of free from the confines of technique that they may have learned in the past. And that technique is not wrong, but they may have taken it on a bit too far. They may have only had one lesson with someone, and that person hasn't had the chance to see a whole process out that would normally take 8 lessons. There's no blame there, but what's the reality is still the singer has taken on something that isn't working, but that they believe is right. And it's our job to then sometimes is to test that theory and level it out again. And so, yeah, when you work with movement of the body, you can work with problems like that. And that's where I usually come in my specialism. It's sort of by using that that's sort of a generalist way of doing it. It's looking at the body in a more general way and singing in a more general way. But what it's left me as a specialism is helping people out of more tricky problems that they can't figure out. And quite often it's because they've learned something that's not serving them, but they're holding it as a belief. And so, yeah, movement helps you to sometimes reprogram that person's idea of how you sing.
So you'd say that, is there a possibility that movement is your bias currently? Or is it just the choice that you make because it's the thing that is often the thing that is far away from any bias or regular instruction that the singer may give their voice? It's so far away from that that it enables them to disassociate, or is that what you go to take away?
That makes it both,
right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's my bias, and it's a way of getting out of bias.
But it's okay.
It's like,
is it all right? Is it all right that it's your bias and that they're? I mean, so guess what I'm getting at?
No, it's conforming to not conform, which makes you a conformist. Right. There is no, and what I said earlier, there's no getting around bias.
Right.
You can't be unbiased. My decision was totally unbiased. That's a fucking impossible statement.
Mm-hmm.
If a human's involved, I don't know, maybe you might tell me, even if AI is involved, it's still biased, but there is no unbiased. I've acknowledged as many biases as I can that could lead the singer in a direction that isn't best for them. If I can acknowledge as many of those as I can, and maybe impose the biases, that's probably the wrong word, but let my biases guide me in what the singer actually wants, and those biases are good, and those specialisms are great. Yeah, it's about self-awareness at the end of the day.
Right. And using these self-awareness and awareness of the tools and your practices, I suppose, so that you're making a choice to use them.
Yeah.
And it isn't just on default.
Yeah, who they serve and who they don't.
Mm-hmm.
But we're always sold on who it serves, and we're never spoken about when it doesn't. And a lot of singing teachers with the right mentality, they'll see it doesn't work, and I am not understanding this. But there's equally as many people who are, this is not working, and the singer doesn't get it. Right? They're the two. The outcome is often the same, but on one hand, the singer is acknowledging that they haven't figured it out for the singer, and on the other hand, the other person is laying it on the singer, not really understanding it, and quite often that's where the problem lies, right? Because the bias is not accommodating those that don't get it, and that's when I had to acknowledge in my singing there is a significant group of people who are not getting it, and I'm sure it's not them, it's me. And they are excluded by how narrow my view is of technique.
You mean they don't even understand that you're just funneling them into a pathway, and maybe even question their own ability because they aren't able to do the thing that you're asking them to do. But they shouldn't actually in that moment be doing the thing.
And I'll just keep doing it until they get it, which is never. Right?
You're crap.
Yeah. God, you're doing my head in. I'm getting angry with you. Fucking.
You're doing my head
Can you just do it? Be better. And that's when some people might go, I only work with professional singers. because, I've had enough of this stuff getting through to people that I just can't get through to them anymore.
People that understand things a little more.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So yeah, there is an element of that. So if there's any skill or advice, you would give teachers at some point, is like I would say learning methods. Methods are mostly narrow in how they look at stuff, and in order for them to be easy to understand and take on, they're often codified. I do this, right? Because it's one of the you can't always create the most messy learning experience when you have to show somebody how to actually start a process, right? You can involve mess into the learning process when somebody is guided by a few principles, right? But on some level, when you learn how to teach or when you learn how to sing, yes, a method or a stepwise thing, it is easier to get on the track, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Right? But at some point, that stops serving you. It becomes now too rigid for how the body really works and how much of a moving target humans are in singing environments, right? Now it has to become about flexibility. So yeah, with anybody learning singing or learning how to teach singing, it's like learn methods because there's great stuff to take from them. But as soon as there are people who, there's no answers there or they don't get it, it's like, just don't assume they don't get it. It's like, expand that view as much as possible. Don't be worried about offending people that you learn from or feel like you're betraying the people that you learn from, right? It's all about acknowledging what biases you might have got from that process and then exploring, instead of exploring techniques, which is a way of doing something. So to go higher, you have to do this with your larynx, or to go high, you have to do this with a vowel or breath. They're instructions. You can learn those, but there will be a load of people who it doesn't work with because that is a decision based on somebody else's knowledge. But when you go behind that, you're guided by principles. What do I know about how air pressure affects the vocal folds? That's a principle. That is not an exercise, but it is how people get exercises. So if you're like, how do I even create exercises? How do I figure people out? It's like, well, if I know what high air pressure, if somebody takes a big breath, what effect that tends to have on the vocal folds versus when somebody barely takes any breath at all, that has common effects on the vocal folds themselves. And if you can learn those things, you can go, okay, now I can understand someone's issue and why it's cascading in their body that way. And therefore I can create an exercise from a knowledge of principles, right? And that's what's most important about learning singing or learning to teach singing as well, is when you go back to the principles contain a lot less bias.
Mm-hmm.
They're the best knowledge we have now about how things work actually on a principle level. And if you can take them forward and always update them, then all of your exercises will come creatively on the fly. Not, what was that exercise for this again? There's no memory involved in remembering. When you're guided by principles, they're in there. And then the exercises come much easier.
Yeah.
The creation of them, it's like, well, I know how this works. So I'll just choose this and this.
They're different from the abstract singing exercises that have been around for years. Oh, I guess I'll do a nay 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 nay. I do the nay nay before my warm up. Well, why? What is it? Well, if it feels good, that's cool. But what you're saying is that if you have that first principle of this is the reasoning as to why this current thing is happening, then you can almost figure out yourself. The tongue needs to move here, and because it's going a different way at the moment. I can give you some things to do that, but you can probably just figure out how to move your tongue or whatever it may be. I mean, so many areas like that, but yeah, just a bit more, it's a little less rigid, and it enables people to just think for themselves. That core understanding.
Yeah, the core understanding.
Yeah.
And it helps. It's like a bullshit meter as well, right? Sometimes you will read stuff and it just does not fit with the principles. Like an R vowel activates chest voice. It just does not fit with the principles. And the amount of time, like I spend 90% of my time activating chest voice through vowels that most people only save for head voice. Because underneath it, there's a different principle at play. It's completely different. And it's to do with resonance.
Well, let's get into that, because that's fascinating to me. I think we've all observed these things. You say there that it's almost you're going against the grain. You're a rebel,
Yeah.
and I'm not doing these things people have spoken about for years. It does seem common. Can you talk about that? What is it why is it that there seem to be a plethora of go-tos or standards in the singing teaching industry that are rarely questioned, despite the fact that either they don't create a lot of benefit, or the benefit is rarely measured? Why do you think it is that we have a number of these things that people go to or just assume, oh, that will work because of, or that's what I do before I have a gig? All these tools or exercises or approaches, methods, but actually it's so many more effective choices to be made within that. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. What do you think? Why are we here? Why have we ended up here?
Well, I mean, the long history of singing through traditional styles like classical, that's had a big effect on what we've taken on today. And in some way, I mean, this is clearly a theory, right, that I've had, but the demographic of people who would take opera seriously 200 years ago or 100 years ago, they tend to come from money. The tuition they would get wouldn't be like once every 2 weeks, every day. It's a completely different environment. And I imagine, this is again from reading text and stuff, if somebody comes in and they are utterly awful at singing opera, this highly notable teacher is not going to hang in there for a couple of years, right? I'm better than this. And then that person they won't get a place in that studio. I work with the best of the best. So on some level, there's already an intrinsic ability, or some level of what would be natural talent, probably called then, that would allow you to even play ball in that environment. So that's already a filter. That already completely skews our idea and the singing teacher's idea of what they can do and what their exercises do, because they're applying them in an environment that's already favourable. But what if somebody is utterly awful at that? And that would take me 2 years. That person is so not in the singing mindset or frame, or, even the state of their voice might be, really rough or something. That would take a lot. But now, today, music is accessible. It's not just an activity of the wealthy anymore. It's the most accessible thing, I think, on the planet now, right? It's amazing. Even the way that you can release and record music. So what we as singing teachers throughout the later 20th century and obviously 21st now, is because it's accessible. We now do see singers who have had no experience, sometimes can't even speak in public. Their speaking voices are different these days because everybody spoke differently 200 years ago because there weren't phones. You genuinely had to call out over long distances sometimes, right? If you're working in agriculture. Voice is probably, I mean, in a lot of ways from books, more robust. So we're dealing with like a wholly different instrument these days. So as a population of singing teachers, we are way more challenged, I find, by those like remedial problems that singers have. So we have to get in the trenches, and we have to kind of figure out, like, an R vowel makes you more chesty. I've heard a million breathy singers where they just sing R vowel, it just sounds breathy. It may activate a resonance in somebody who's already got good closure, right? Which might smack of the whole 200 years ago thing. The person you're willing to take on. But the person you ain't, it's different. It's different. The reason why the opposite is so often true, the head voice vowel, which is often the oohs, and the e's, the combination would be e, right? Which we are known as a Y buzz, if you want to look it up, known as a Y buzz. But that becomes possible because of modern research. And I'm not just saying I only trust modern research, right? A lot of it is, sometimes we just do things we don't know why they work. But one thing you can take from modern research is the effect of resonance on the voice.
Right.
And one of the ways you capture resonance in voice, and resonance is the energy in the sound wave you produce and how you can get that to favorably interact with the shapes in your throat and mouth. And we all know that if I was to I say this to singers all the time, if you were going to make a low note and I was to give you a didgeridoo or a recorder, which one do you think would do better making the low note louder? And they always choose the right answer. We all know that there's a relationship between a space and the frequencies or the pitches it's best resonating. So we know there's a relationship between shape and pitch. And so when we make a sound with the vocal folds and that enters the shapes of our throat and mouth, we're on a similar plane. We still have the ability to create shapes with those that favorably interact with that sound and actually make it bigger and stronger. And if we can do that, one of the ways we can do that is to make the mouth space smaller, because what that does then, that doesn't let the energy out of the voice or the vocal tract and the mouth. Instead, it reflects sound energy back in and keeps it all in there. And when we do that, it allows it to really build to big levels. And whenever there's a lot of energy bouncing around in the throat and mouth, it has a strong influence on how the vocal folds work. So, and people in opera will know this because they have to maximize that in order to sing without a mic over a big orchestra. Pop singers don't need to maximize that as much because they use mics, but you wouldn't want to unfavorably set yourself up. You still have to favorably set yourself up. But either way, when we trap resonance through what would be closed vowels, those ones, they really help the vocal folds to actually vibrate in a larger amplitude. So they make bigger claps and stronger collisions, which produces a stronger sound. So when resonance can have this effect of doing that on the voice, then you can strengthen the voice really well. And then suddenly people who have not had chest voice or struggled with it before, now we get resonance to serve them and support them and help their vocal folds to actually become or to take on the sort of the function that we would associate more with chest voice, thick vocal folds and good closure. And from there, we can open out to the open vowels, but we had to accommodate the voice in the beginning. We have to help it to come together using resonance. And that's why closed vowels, although we've used them for head voice historically, and there's another reason for that, but now we're using them to activate chest voice, but it's all been informed by research on resonance. And it absolutely checks out. So, don't trust science just because science said. You have to try it out on as many people as possible. And that's where I've done my work as well. It's like thousands of people I've worked on resonance on closed vowels in chest voice, and it is fantastic. But we have to challenge the beliefs for that.
So would you say, is it easy as saying, to some degree, that with the resonance part, that there's a particular shape, that's what we want to use in the vocal tract for every pitch in order to achieve whatever goal you want to achieve? And I would say that the most common goal is a clear sound bottom top, because that indicates that the voice is going to be stable based on how the vocal tract feeds back on itself, etc. Would you agree that is probably a common goal within teachers, even though they may not express it? That foundation, we're looking for that clear sound that is accommodated by the vocal tract being in the right shape for the pitch that you're currently performing.
Yeah, well, let's put it in the context of if it isn't, the voice really struggles, and everybody will have moments like that when they sing. When someone sings a particular vowel that just will not handle that level of volume, or there's parts of the range on certain vowels that just feel like they go really rough and struggle to come together. So whenever we actually misalign resonances or shapes with pitches, we can experience a really intense amount of extra effort and risk things like being injured. So your the tiredness level just comes in really quickly. You know, it might only be 5-10 minutes of singing
If you're
before
misaligned.
if you're misaligned, yeah. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it helps someone feel like this is going to be less overwhelming. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to learn an exact shape for every pitch. You might do in operatic senses in some way, because you have to really find as much energy in the vocal tract as you can to carry over an orchestra. But for pop singers, sometimes you just need to find a shape that is able to suit a large set of frequencies or pitches, right?
Right.
So one of those sounds would be this one, right? So this one, like that one, it can be very helpful for some people. And although that sounds like opera, it does sound a bit like opera. But even someone like Lady Gaga and Christina Aguilera, right? They all have an element of this kind of tongue, back of the tongue sound in there. And what that does, that puts a really strong resonance, sort of ringy situation that allows you to sing a whole set of pitches, but still you're able to leverage the resonance from that. And what that frees you from is being too careful with your vowels. It means that you can say more vowels and not fall apart. Same with this one, wah, wah, like, you know, the kind of witchy cry. That has a similar effect in that if that's present across a certain frequency range or pitch range, you often find singers that use a little bit of that, they again tend to be a bit freer with their vowels, because now they're not just relying on the vowel and the shapes of that to produce this like effect of resonance to support them, but instead they're using something else that I don't want to get too technical, but that uses or utilizes frequencies in the voice that are just much, much higher than the vowel formants, right? It's just it's a bit complicated, but either way, if you look into it, it's all about like having something that resonates in a frequency range that is beyond the vowel formants. And if you do that, then you can actually move the mouth more. You can be a lot easier with the vowels if you have something else serving you. And quite often we can use that as a way to help people feel like their singing is a lot less complicated, that they have to be a lot less careful, especially in the break or the bridge of the voice. And so when we look at resonance, yes, we can use specifics in the vowels to access resonance, or we can use overarching characters like witchiness or hey Kermit, or like those things. Even if we put them in tiny amounts, they allow us to be free of the vowel a little bit, but still access the resonances in the voice. And that way, yeah, again, we can start to, through those parts of the voice that feel like they are really not serving us and things feel misaligned, we can realign them with things like that. And then it becomes really cool, because then we can get into style and character and what those sounds mean to actually the songs themselves and the singer's identity.
Would you say that sort of thing, that sort of sound, and so, well, first, would you agree that something's moved? A choice had to be made to make that sound.
Yeah.
Right. So something had to move. We would probably say that something in the vocal tract, the tongue to begin with.
Yeah.
Right. So where my mind goes is bigger picture thinking. So are we agreeing there that is a crutch that we're going to use? And it doesn't, again, negative. It doesn't need to be a negative thing, but because some people may like that sound. Again, you've heard Lady Gaga use that periodically, but if it is something that my thinking is that if we had to move the tongue to a particular place to make that happen, then does that reduce my flexibility in other choices? If I'm so one example I always give is twang, right? Seems to me, and this is anecdotal, and I don't care.
Here's your evidence.
The finger. That twang is awesome, you know, and as far as you know, as far as the industry is concerned, just how it's created can differ.
Yeah.
You know, how much of it is going through the nose, how much of it is created in the throat. No one really knows ever without. Well, I mean, even if you put a camera down someone's throat, you can't see it. But that kind of sound. How did I make that? I mean, I guess my pharynx constricted a tiny bit. I guess my soft palate dropped a tiny bit. But what I say, what I've seen over the years is that, especially in musical theatre, that singers will be able to produce that, and it's a cool. If you've never produced, if you never produced that before, and you feel the what it does for you as a singer and the sound you can create, I mean, this is the greatest thing that's ever happened to me. But
Yeah.
it's still, for me, it's still a stepping stone to the final result, which is not using that universally, not having to have my soft palate drop like that consistently. And actually, what we're looking for is just a small step away from that. And that may mean raising the soft palate tone. It may mean the tongue doesn't go quite as high. But so more of a short term thing to use those crutches. But all that said, I'm definitely I'm aware that even that, I'm assuming that what we want as singers and as teachers for our singers is that we have this ability to create almost, I guess, a neutral sound across my entire range from bottom to top, and that's the best scenario, because being neutral, so to speak, I haven't gone to extremes. So, for example, if a way that a lot of people find twang to begin with is to create some real small spaces.
Yes. Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
can even the bass even screws up. So this doesn't seem like a great place to be if you want to create different sounds on one melody, on one line in a song. You want to jump from that down to something warmer
Yeah.
or less. So you either have to get really good at moving these things around in the vocal track quickly, or I would say aim for a more neutral positioning that creates great resonance from bottom to top, even though it may not satisfy every stylistic choice you want. But from there, then you can pivot from there. And it's the old school approach, to get your foundation, your technique in first, because then you got more options. And it really started to come true for me more over the past few years. That that is, you see the reality of that. If you get locked up in an extreme posture within the vocal tract, then it's harder to get out. I'm not saying people can't learn to move quick, but would you say that those things are best used as a stepping stone to other things, or a crutch, or do some singers in your experience just sit there and use those things and it's completely fine to sing with what people would maybe call a canurdle, the tongue, that thing? You hear it in rock a bit, I'm sure, but
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
do you think it's all right to sit with those things and be the thing?
Yeah, I do. I think again, if we take bias again, if someone does this a little bit, someone might say, but that's tongue tension and that's bad. That would be a strong bias that's still out there, and they will try and get rid of it, not understanding that actually it's very serving to a lot of people, and it does have its limits in terms of range. Absolutely, it's not there for everybody. But that's where the principal understanding comes from. Don't just say you can't do it to D5. You need to understand the principles by which that doesn't work high up. And then you can make a choice as to when it's absolutely perfect or when it's not. So that comes into principal understanding. But if somebody let's say CeeLo Green, we're not going to tell CeeLo Green to not be twangy.
Mm-hmm.
It's tell you to fuck off.
Quite rightly.
Yeah, probably quite strongly as well.
Yeah. With a lovely warm tone.
Yeah.
Well, no, actually not with him.
Yeah, and you say, thanks, I will. And what? Yeah, he convinced me pretty easily.
Really
Must
short,
be his dulcet tones.
Really short conversation.
Yeah, fuck off. No, but the point is, I think, really, how do we help people sustain the thing they sell records on, right? And if we see the voice, if you could just boil it down to like the vocal cord, we see it as like a joint, right? And one thing we do know from like a bit of research, right, that the likelihood of getting stuck in a problem or sometimes injured is greater when you live in an extreme, right? If you sing with a lot of something, and on the scale of things, it's right over there on the extreme, or if it's right over there on the extreme, often that uses up quite a lot of resource or mileage or whatever in your voice, and there's a greater likelihood that at some point in the future you're going to have to address that. It's too much time in one thing. It's like doing a lot of bicep curls and never ever doing any triceps. It's like, when does your elbow give out different times for different people, and maybe somebody never at all, I don't know, but it's all about like probability, and sometimes we're just like looking at like the probability of it. But we need to balance that and say what we want to do is we want to optimize how you sing in that sound. Let's say it's twangy. Maybe what we need to do is adjust a few things within the twang, like how much pressure and breathiness there is on that continuum of squeeze and breathiness. Maybe it's that needs to be refined. Maybe it's through movement we can influence breath to be a little less forced, and actually then the twang is just fine. We need to, so if we look holistically like that, we can help singers to actually remain in the thing that sells the records and what they want, but make sure that everything around it is not causing that fatigue, is not hitting the extremes, right? And then there's the other side of it is, if I was to do a lot of bicep curls, bench presses are a great example, is that even though their job is to lift a lot of weight in this direction, a lot of bench pressing protocols to get really great is pulling, is the absolute opposite, because at the end of the day, to lift a lot of weight this way, your shoulder needs to be stable. So that's when the thing you're doing more of it doesn't necessarily make you better, because it's about more than just how strong you are in your chest. Mm-hmm. And it's a bit like the voice. Like if you're constantly like yelling all day, it makes sense that doing a little bit of falsetto would be quite fancy and good and really nice for your voice. Not all the time, not saying you shouldn't do chest voice. It's like, let's make sure that chest voice isn't burning you, and let's do the thing that's good for the joint of your voice. The thing that isn't going to mean that you're living in an extreme 24/7. And so we often use the opposite actions to facilitate what they're doing rather than tell them not to do it. And that's, you often get forced with that. Like if you end up working with pro singers or singers that are signed and you change their sound, you'll be off the team. You can't just say don't do that. You can't say that's unhealthy and you can't use that sound, it's going to hurt you. It's got to be, how can we get this to a situation where that sound is going to live comfortably? And we can measure that, because fatigue is obviously is usually a big measure of that. Like, I see it all the time. It's like we'll get singers to report and they're like, yes, 3 gigs in a row and I'm not screwed. That would have been 1 before. So we know something's working, and we've been able to remain broadly in the sound that they were doing. And so that's where I feel like what you've described, I think, is true. Is like, is it possible to be in the equilibrium as what you described? Is it possible to be in neither extreme but right down the middle? If it is, it means then they've got an ability to decompress. They've got an ability to save themselves from tricky situations if they need to. They're not living in an extreme, which increases the likelihood of injury. That's what we're teaching them to do. But the other side of it is also helping them to understand how the sound they sing with is put together, and how it can exist easier, less tiring.
And so your one of your comparisons in there was weights and lifting, bench pressing versus the pull, and so that would suggest that that an underlying goal would be balance, because that's what pushing and pulling. I know for sure these days with the 25 years of hunching over a laptop, and also wanting to have the best chest on a Saturday night. I mean, you go out for
the disco muscles.
Yeah, and it's just stupid boy. I was just thinking, and that was going to be but just recently, I mean, the effect of doing 2 days of pulling first, and then just the one chest. I mean, it just changes the way you live your life.
Mm-hmm.
But that would suggest that we're aiming for balance, we're aiming for efficiency, and that does play into a good another observation in recent years, and that is seemingly the lack of clarity around what we're actually heading for. And I personally think that if there can be more clarity around why we're here and what we're aiming for specifically, and that goes far beyond, you're a singer and I'm a singing teacher. We do some singing, and hopefully you'll get better by the end of it. that's a good. That seems like a good place to start. But actually, I sense unless you go deeper than that and clarify a few things within that, then it's actually very hard to make significant progression. Also to avoid frustrations, and actually, you're gonna. It's harder for the relationship between the teacher and singer to be better in that circumstance because you're both not really sure what you're doing. So we just want to be better at this singing thing, or in this moment, I just want this song to sound better, or I want this note to come out without me breaking. They're good acute goals, but actually, is everyone to some extent working towards balance? Is that a safe thing to say without saying it? Is everyone working towards? Yeah, I mean, it makes sense that I don't want to fatigue my voice. So that's a good somewhere within this lesson plan that's included that we are going to veer away from ruining voices. Over here, we're also going to work towards balance within the instrument. So what does that mean? Well, it manifests itself with a clean tone, not breathy, and also not pressed. And would a lot of people agree that? And we just don't talk about it. Would we agree that breathing is somewhat important in singing? So therefore, the right amount of airflow is important. And the reason I say that is because you see a lot of interesting conversations online on forums, Facebook forums, where it seems that there are a lot of good conversations in a way, but when the emotion sets in, no, you should be doing that with those singers, or you, but rarely is the goal clarified. Rarely is no, because what I'm aiming for is this. Just because we're singing teachers doesn't mean that we share the same goal. Right, and so a good example of that would be, I've heard a lot over the years, especially at artist camps, people saying, we don't use the word wrong or incorrect. What we use is, what we say is, no, you're an artist. You can do whatever you like. You are free. Really though? How free are you as an artist, really? So if you start with, if you want to be heard by other human beings in the Western world, right? Can I sing within this song? Am I allowed to sing in quarter tones? No, because the audience will be weirded out by that, right? Equally with timing, similar thing. How in time do I need to be? Well, generally, if we're really being honest here, there's a small element of error you can have when you're singing in terms of timing. Oh, he's so cool because he's pushed the timing a bit. Yeah, but it wasn't after the track had finished. Right, there's a parameter there that you have to live within.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah. What's acceptability is that point, isn't it, where the listener goes, oh.
Right.
And you can't explain it, but it's just that point where it just makes the listener go, eesh.
Yeah,
that's gone way further. Yeah. And obviously singers are great at pushing those boundaries without having any idea of what it means in terms of a measurement, but it's feel.
And so you would say that the third one would be tone. We often say to our in our school, we say tuning, timing, tone. It's a good little memory. But tone, again, if you sing, I know my mind again. I mean, I basically hit the notes.
Was that Adele?
And I basically was in time, right? But the audience would want their money back if they paid for that. And so all I've done, in my opinion, I've just closed off a lot of what was happening in my throat to make singing really hard and create a strange sound. So clearly there's a parameter there in terms of tone as well, and they're just three of them, right? And you can correlate with that efficiency with the voice. How much? I again personally I think that it's fundamental to have this, what some people may refer to as support, some people refer to as flow,
Mhm.
this sense. And if you've never sung before, you will never experience it. It's this beautiful feeling of compressed air in your torso, and that you're really not doing a lot, but there's this beautiful energy just
Mhm.
flying out of your mouth into other people's faces.
Yeah.
I mean, and so for that to occur, there do needs to be some things in place. But maybe so then to say to someone, you can do what you want. Okay, then if I never see you again, or I never visit another voice teacher, and I spend the next 2 years doing what I want, am I going to achieve what I really want from this? No, you're not. You are. Well, you might do, but if I was to say to you, actually, if you adhere to this, and you adhere to achieving a clear tone from the bottom to the top to begin with, and that's going to feel good, by the way. And in fact, that'll probably trump any feelings you have about your own artistry or selling records at that point, because you feel so amazing about your voice. Got a hunch, but maybe it won't. Maybe you are really obsessed with making money out of selling your music, and that is the biggest thing for you. But actually, I think that if you can sing and have this amazing feeling in your lifetime, that is going to be the best. That will trump everything. But then, in addition to that, in order to do that, things need to be in line. So you need some balance in your voice to do that. So I've already trashed this whole you can do whatever you want. And that leads to the goal that they want, which is if you want people in the audience to be happy, or at least not weirded out by what you are currently singing, then you are going to have to adhere to these things. And maybe I'm being too granular, right? But because maybe a lot of people just take that as read, but a lot of people don't. And you do see young artists take that advice on board and say, I am an artist and I can do what I want. You're going to be so sad in 5 years' time
Yeah.
when you haven't put your mind into what is it that's going to make me create lovely sounds with my voice, and what's the quickest way for me to do that.
Mm.
Again, that's my opinion. I think it's based on years of seeing sadness in the industry with singers. What do you think about that? Do you think there's legs in that way of think? Do you think that it's underappreciated to some extent, some of the things that singers should know or need to know, instead of some of these blanket statements that are thrown out in the moment on, you just do what you like. You can create whatever music you like. If you want to stay in your bedroom all your life and enjoy that experience, then do what you want. But if you want other people to hear you and appreciate and actually relate to something that is clearly familiar to them, then you're going to have to adhere to a couple of things. Do you think that there's something to clarity in language on that basis? And
Mm.
or if there is a case where you don't need to adhere to any parameter or few parameters in your journey as an artist or as a singer.
Yeah, that's a tricky one. There's a double-edged sword in everything,
Mm-hmm.
right? So do what you want versus guidance. When you do what you want, but you accept no guidance, or you accept only guidance and don't do enough of what you want, they all are going to have their detriment in some way. And, becoming famous or landing on something is a bit of a perfect storm at times. And when looking maybe back in the days of like especially the 50s and 60s and 70s, when actually a lot of styles were being first defined at that time, I imagine if vocal coaches were involved in those processes, none of this music would be nearly as good, right? Because we do need to let people break the rules. But then the landscape then was different. You could argue that, well, we were entering a whole new phase. Like look at the Beatles coming in and rock and roll, and people like that sort of really making certain styles of music super duper commercial. And then all the, all the blues that they would have taken from before that, there would have been some resistance and backlash to that sort of singing. So we can assist people in being experimental in that way, but also acknowledging, like, what are you doing this for? Are you doing this for because you really want to like be a world dominating singer, or I would like to make £100,000 a year from my music, or even just 50 grand would be great. I'll get by. if your goal is to make music and also to make money, on some level, you probably have to adhere to a few rules about taste, right? Because if you want to make a lot of money, arguably you're going to have to balance out that taste a little bit, right? You know, like the most popular music is not the most experimental for a reason, right? But there are some people out there who are making music or even art in any way that is only for themselves. It's what they like. And if people would like to come along for the ride, then that's your choice. I'll make it available at a small fee or a large fee, whatever you want. And for that to happen well, that really has to be a perfect storm. It's like down to the singer's influences, their upbringing, their identity, how comfortable they are with themselves, self-awareness. And you may argue that from that process, you may find the most insanely wonderful thing ever from saying do what you want. But the collateral is there'll be loads of people without enough influence and self-assurance, self-efficacy, musical education, as in, not singing, but music itself. There'll be a load of people who haven't had enough input on that, and they will genuinely do what they want and come up with something that nobody would ever buy. And the likelihood of that happening is probably greater when there's no guidance, isn't there? But the potential for there to be someone unbelievable is greater. So we're seeing that is that, when we add guidance into it, we probably ensure the success of more people. But do we limit then the diamond that could be found, the single diamond, in that? We probably do limit that. And that's just the ebb and flow of that sort of input. And again, there's no right or wrong answer. Because it really is about the singer's goals at the end of the day. And if we listen to their goals and we're like, okay, you want to make money and you want to do this and you want to tour the world, and we look at things and we put them forward, and it won't be my singing teacher's feedback, but it might be like, why don't you just go and I've got a friend in a record label, or I've got a friend with who's an independent music manager, and then you can say, we can just have a listen to this casually, get feedback, and then it's like your feedback from the industry and also from the people that are going to buy it, who you want to buy it. They won't buy it. If you want to sell music, you're probably going to have to change something. The production might not be right, or your vocal styles might just be a little bit too whack, And therein we often see singers that come in. So quite often famous singers come in on very different styles than what they are used to, because they are entering into the market in a different place. It's like someone like Sam Smith or Emily Sandé, or Pink. Look at Pink. Pink's an insane example of someone who's come into the world, to the music market, in a way that the people who are guiding her saw as the most successful way in at that time, which is through R&B.
Right.
Pink's first few records was like so R&B, it was ridiculous. She could have been in Destiny's Child. She was that R&B. Do you know what I mean? Like, in terms of style. And then there came a point when she's like, fuck that, I'm doing what I want because I'm big now. And then she became the kind of pop punk hardcore flipping, back flipping, whatever. She completely U-turned on that, right? So there is an element of like, what
toe in the line,
what people will sell, what the market thinks will sell, and then eventually you get a way in. Sam Smith went more left field in terms of, like with people like Disclosure, and then when he releases his album, it's not left field at all. It's very much ballads. Do you know what I mean? Where all the other stuff was edgy as fuck, and that's often the way that maybe the managers and the labels see the way in for a new artist like that. So depending on what the goals are for the artists, the managers, the labels, and all that stuff together, they may enter into a style initially that is nothing like the style they want to end up in. Emily Sandé was the same. Rag and Bone Man is the same. They've changed.
They did what they needed to do to get in there.
Or and probably we're happy with that, but now they've got a bit more autonomy over what they do because they sell records and there's influence there.
Creative space.
Yeah, creative space, and the record label's like, you sell records, so maybe there'll be some flexibility there and what you want to do stylistically, that kind of thing. There is a cooperation there, but that's why maybe the issue of how much flexibility there is in the creative process,
Mhm.
it really is down to the goals and the situation at that time and what do I want? What do I want now?
You'd almost go
Um,
as far to say that there's a huge conflict there, isn't there? And I've just seen this happens. This happens in many areas, in even just the singing industry, that things get conflated, and you end up in a situation where you have a singer that loves the process of singing and creating music, and actually they're pretty. They've got some skill in many areas, so the stuff that they create is good. And then we enter the world of now I need to sell it,
yeah,
and the things that are required, they almost can't coexist, but they do, and you see why it creates so much conflict with singers, because they have to do so many things that conflict with this, right? I mean, you actually have to.
mm,
A lot of it is that you go from it being mainly about creation to now it's about business, analytics, and ensuring that uh, what's the quickest way for me to increase to increase my following.
mm.
As a well, I mean these two things again, especially back in the day when labels came in with a lot of money and had a team behind. That's obviously why it worked so well, because they were still able to
Yeah,
do their thing. Whereas
they could
now,
invest, and there's a reconciliation, yeah, between I want to sell it and I want to preserve my artistry, and maybe my artistry and maybe the way I sing is just a bit too left field for the market right now, right? The feedback I'm not getting is wonderful. That's where collaboration comes in, isn't it? So sometimes when you combine a really left field singer with exactly the right producer, you're able to reconcile those two things, and then you might find something absolutely unbelievable. That's why when it comes to artists trying to find that, they're often insular and they're with themselves and they're guiding themselves, but influence is enormous.
Mhm.
Music is all about influence, whether it be the people you listen to, but then the people you work with. So yeah, that's why if somebody is unsure about their sound, do I change the way I sing? Is it a bit too bonkers? Or is it a bit like salt? Like a whole handful of salt? Not a good idea. Tastes like shit. But salt is the greatest ingredient on the planet, right? And I would often say this is a terrible analogy, but if an alien flies down and says, "What is the greatest ingredient on the planet?" I would absolutely say salt. Have it around a margarita rim, sprinkle it in a bolognese,
the great
even in chocolate.
the greatest thing on the planet.
Oh, in terms of ingredient, there's not many dishes or many things where salt cannot live. Like an absence of salt
Mm.
would be a shit world. I'll tell you that for nothing. Not just because all the fish in the sea would die, but no, I'm talking about food, right? But as great as salt is, if you eat it in its
Mm.
raw form, an alien would be like, "I'm not putting that in my food. That was
Mm.
horrible." Right? It's a horrible experience because it's all about how much. Do I throw it out, or have I just not balanced it with enough other elements? And music's like that. Sometimes the thing on its own, maybe it's the voice quality is just on its own, just a bit too left field. But when you balance it out with the other elements, maybe you soften it or something, or maybe even really balanced voices that are not that exciting are really amped up by the energy in the production. That's the other way around, right?
Mm.
They form a complementary net result of music, not just singing, but it's music at the end of the day, right? And so you can, even with some of the most wacky ways of singing, you can balance it out with so many different elements that I think the most talented producers are able to do that and have a vision for it that works with the singers. Unless the singer is so far out of musical rules. Like you said earlier, the timing is 3 bars too late, the pitch is way too far out, and the tone makes the singing impossible to understand. Then it's like, yeah, that's not going to work,
Mm.
you know?
So would we say that so in summary, uh, across those points, would we say that it's a good thing for a singer to have a good idea of what their goals are, and what they're aiming to achieve, to get clarity on what it takes to achieve that? So we're talking directly with the voice itself, because that is the core of what anyone's going to do, whether they want to be their own artist or however they want to use their voice. The voice working in a good way is a good start there, and then you can add in these other aspects. But it's the goal of my vocal journey. What am I aiming for at the end of this that could change? And within that, then, what are some smaller goals on the way there that are going to help me achieve that? If I have to break them down, and what happens if it doesn't? If these things that are supposed to help me don't help me, do I have some other tools and exercises that I can use for that? And we obviously got onto the point there. I mean, very specifically about artists themselves, recording artists, and that isn't everyone in the industry. So again, that's a small subset of people that require something different. So if you're not a recording artist and you're listening to this, then you may have some other some other considerations for your voice. But the goal of the lesson and the approach and the current training period is important. What would you say that I know you've spoken a lot about movement and resonance today, but what would you say is the main goal for you for your students? And this is a horrible question because everyone's different is the first thing that comes to mind. Everyone's different, so I'm going to adapt. But is it possible for you to categorize or to, in some way, find a theme or a trend with the goal for your students? Is there anything in there that's similar across everyone that you're aiming for?
Well, sometimes that's guided by the sort of people that come to me, right? So you end up in an inadvertent goal, right? Led by what people want. They all want the same thing, so it sort of makes your goal very similar at times. And for me, quite often, this is partly because of my history. As you know, if we got a long history together, making the move from having a regular job to a singing job, right? Main income voice. And then seeing that become really, really difficult on a full-time level. So my goals often are to get the singers that I work with back up to speed and feeling confident that their voice is not going to give out on them. So a lot of my training ends up for those people, let's say that's like 30-40% of who I work with. A lot of those techniques then would be around efficiency. How do we look at the way you sing and the sound you produce, and can we stay broadly in that style? Right? Whenever you make a change to the voice, there's always some change to the sound, but whether that goes outside of like, no, now that sounds ridiculous. It's gone too far. So can we stay within that sort of parameter of what still sounds right, but we've improved efficiency in it? Then that is playing around a lot with how the voice is put together in terms of breath and in terms of how the vocal cords come together. And breath is always influenced by posture as well. So sometimes we're looking at movement as well. But when it comes to the other side of the goal is like, what's the best thing I could leave the singer with, right? And at the end of the day, it's autonomy. Autonomy is the greatest tool that you can leave somebody with. And how do I leave them with that, right? And it does come back around to what I mentioned earlier. It's sort of related to negative practice, but it's allowing people, rather than say, pull your belly in for this note or open your mouth for that note, if you understand safely how or what the range of things are, so vowels might be open to closed, or the tongue might be furthest forward to furthest back, or even highest up to lowest down. It might be most nasal to least nasal, right? It might be widest, narrowest, jaw lowest, highest.
Feeling the spectrum.
Yeah, feeling the spectrum, right? And because you could do everything in the body and it'd be overwhelming. So that's where we become guides. It's like I'm able to drip feed these different parameters to people so they don't get overwhelmed with them. But what that then allows them to do is to say, singers very rarely believe that they can do any of those things. I don't believe that I didn't even think to move my tongue forward, backwards, or high or down. And the way we do it isn't just do it. We kind of do it as an exploration silently, then with sound, then in song, understand its relationship to pitch. Oh, it works there. It doesn't work so well there. That explains why that person does it and why that person doesn't. now it's becoming clearer, is because not everything is about great singing is when the tongue is doing this, or great singing is when the belly is doing that. It all depends. And how do you find the depends? Well, you have to explore the combinations of things and realize, yes, pulling the belly in works if also these things are in place. And I create like the autonomy and the permission for singers to be able to combine these things, like the loudness through a vowel. Like a lot of people are like, yeah, closed vowels just don't accept loudness like open ones do. There's reasons for that, but lots of people still don't make that change or make that connection. Instead, it's like, well, I'm going to have to open the vowel now. Like instead of saying you, I'll have to say yo, but then I sound like pop punk. I don't want to sound pop punk. I don't want to say yo.
Mm-hmm.
But someone who hasn't understood the combinations of like volume and vowel, right, and really combine them and gone, just explore them, and you'll realize, like, if you back off the volume a bit, that closed vowel will probably work, but to the listener it won't sound weaker. It won't sound that much weaker. It's still going to work in the style and the intensity of things, but it's just the way you're approaching that volume, usually with a lot of air pressure. The closed vowel is not going to accept it on a high pitch. And when we give the singers those bits, and that's helping them to understand principles under the voice as well. When we give them that, and we can give them combinations, suddenly what you do, when they come back, they say something like this. I love it every time. They would say, you know what, I actually tried, and they'll say something I didn't give them. I tried this, because suddenly they were like, oh, he's just, and I say to you, I'm just understanding what the range of motion is of something, and I'm just randomly asking you to combine different things on a range of motion. And then they come back and tell me they experimented with something I never suggested. And I'm just like, yes, bingo. You have autonomy, and you discovered something. And that thing you discovered was actually better than what I showed you.
Mm.
Right? Because that's really is like, some of the greatest solutions will come from the singer. So as the teacher, don't feel bad. Don't feel like you need all the answers, because if you provided the playground and they found something fantastic, you are the best teacher. That means you don't need to have the answers. You just need to create the situation. And then again, you can absolve yourself from having to know everything, having to do absolutely everything. And that lets imposter syndrome fall away, and security, and like, we'll find something ace. I guarantee it. If I show you how to combine different things and then you tell me what works, I guarantee you will find something ace every time. And my job is to make sure that you don't go outside of the parameters whereby that becomes unhealthy, genuinely, or too risky. All of those things are part of like the intuition as a teacher, to understand what the limits of things are and allowing people to play within the limits. So yeah, that's where, and so the autonomy of that, and when people come back with that report, that for me is like, that's the goal. We're going to keep going with that one.
Might not have been the case in the first few years of teaching, right?
No, it definitely wasn't. I needed
You're doing
the
something I didn't tell you to do.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh God, I'm shit. Because I didn't know. Even they know better than me, and they're a beginner. And it's like, no, it's the discovery.
Or that I'm so good at this job. Why on earth would you do something I didn't ask you to do?
The arrogance.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
You didn't know anything.
Yeah, you did absolutely nothing. I told you. Yeah, it's classic, isn't it? But yeah, so that for me is like ultimate goal. And it doesn't pin, like, ultimate goal is singing up to blah, 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 or whatever. I don't care. Autonomy will lead to all those things anyway.
Right.
You know what I mean?
So you would say then that is your, what would you say? That with your goal, that you've had to incorporate, there have been some other sub goals incorporated, or parameters that you incorporate into what you're doing in every lesson, that then contribute to the goal of supplying autonomy to the students. Would you agree with that? And then if you do, what would you say are some of the parameters that maybe just be taken for granted? For example, one would be, back to the clear tone as a singer. Do we all, for the most part, believe that a clean, clear tone is the foundation of efficient singing? And some people from there would agree that that's a good pathway to follow, because then it supplies me with the ability to do this or that or whatever else it may be. Is that one for you? And are there other ones that you, across the board, no, yeah, we definitely need, of course we need that in place, and of course we need that in place. Are there anything like that for you that you can think of?
Well, when it comes to clear tone, I mean, if a clear tone is not possible anywhere, then I guess it's cause to look deeply at the voice a little bit more, because there may be reasons for that. There may be reasons, unavoidable reasons, which could be vocal injury or even things to do with like aging, like older singers where clear tone is not possible. But either way, you've got to search for a clear tone to actually understand how that is sort of sitting anyway.
For those who don't know, which again may sound silly and obvious, but also what does a clear tone suggest?
So this was but sometimes they like noise. Things that it could be any element of noise that comes into that sound. And even some pressed sounds. I mean, the more I press, the more rough it sounds, right? But some voices that are a little bit squeezy, they can still sound clear, but we tend to hear the element of effort within it, right? So that's when clear tone might not always mean like totally healthy, right?
Gotcha.
But it's when noise, and also that breathiness, and breath is an element of noise that gets introduced to the sound, right? And when they're there, that does suggest that there are things that could create inefficient singing. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. It's often a balance as to whether what you're hearing is inefficient enough for it to cause the singer trouble in their goals. So for somebody who sings once every couple of weeks at an open mic night or a karaoke, is it a big deal? No, probably not. It also, because it's not a big deal, the singer isn't always very motivated to change it either. And it's not for us always to just be like, you should change that. But where I tend to work with like a lot of professional singers and people like that, there is a motivation to explore more efficient singing because they might be getting tired too early in the week. And quite often some noise in the sound is the indicator that is happening. So we need to look around and go, okay, when we do things like physical movement or resonance work, if the tone clears up and that hasn't been possible before, then we know that maybe the singer has something they can do. And whether they do that in the singing itself or they do that in the off season, they do that in warming up, they do that in cooling down. In their practice sessions, they practice more clean tones, but they don't worry too much about the rougher tones that come in when they're singing. Or even they're learning to do proper rough tones, which often have a clear sound underneath, but something more noisy on top, which is not the vocal cords. Then there is an element of, what is that noise? But generally, I think, if a clear tone is possible, but we can't find it, then I think it is a reason to be looking into vocal exercises to find a clear tone. Yeah, but not worry about it too much. And if anybody's concerned about that, it would be like, go and see a specialist vocal coach, or just, especially in the UK, you can get booked on the NHS, a free scope. If you just wait friggin' ages, because the waiting lists are really long, but you can always get it looked at if you need to,
So you would say that is actually, for them, not to say universally, but it's likely the high percentage of teachers that will be working towards that as a fundamental goal. And then if you don't have a clear tone, then the question marks around that. How long have you been working on your voice to govern a clear tone? And if it's been 3 years and you still don't, then it might be worth being looked at with a camera down your throat.
Yeah,
to some degree.
But when often it's the singer's goal, so often it's like, but I want to sound like that, and that's like, cool, yes, that's really good. Now let's look at how you achieve that sound. And sometimes people dirty up their voices and rough them up in a way that is wholly unsustainable. And they do notice that in the fatigue of the voice. It's quite obvious when they sing for longer periods of time. It's just not sustainable. So it's like, I acknowledge that you want like a rough effect on your voice, but the way you're doing it is now. But what singers are often scared about is being changed a lot of the time. So as much as the teacher is like, yes, clear tone, and the singer's kind of just nodding, it's almost unsaid. So much is unsaid of the singer goes, I actually don't like that. and the teacher's thinking it's great, and I feel stupid to say you know. So then that's one of those moments when plateaus happen, everything stagnates, because really a lot is unsaid about that. So I often have to say, clear tone is an indicator of something positive, something about longevity. It's not what I see you have to sound like. That's not my goal for you to be that way. But it's just an indicator of things able to live out of the extreme, and that allows you probably in the future to have a longer career. If that's what you'd like, spend a little bit of time on clear tone, and then we can also work to figure out how you create the rough effect in a way that doesn't tire you out as quickly, right? But I have to say, I'm not trying to change you. It's not my bias.
Right, and so setting the goal again, though, back to that, which seems to be really important.
A lot of reassurance and a lot of co-op. Like if it's master student, it's like clear tone. That's master student again. The two-way conversation isn't there, so the chances of you getting that unsaid problem where singers go nowhere because truly you don't deeply agree on what the goal is tonally. That's why master student often is still a pain in the bum.
Yeah, agree on it. And from over the years, it makes me think that it's actually the belief in or trust in the system, because do this, because distortion. I'm a firm believer that even if a singer can create the distortion that they want at the moment, but the unfortunate side effect is they can't do any more than 1 gig a week. And that could snowball across weeks to months, and clearly they express the unhappiness about that. Well, in those moments, I actually do think that, I've proven over the years that if you almost have to step aside from the way you're currently producing the distortion, the posture you're requesting to make that sound, you almost can't even go close to it in order to improve it. We actually have to come at this in we have to step to what efficient singing is and then work our way back, possibly even in a new way. And the distortion may not sound the way you want it to sound for a long time, if at all ever the same. And that can be really disheartening. And to a point where this happens across the board in life, but I can do enough of what I need to do, or it's good enough, right? In fact, I can do the thing really well. That sounds awesome. I definitely don't want to put any work into changing that, or it's going to be too long for me to want to change that. So in fact, I'll take the hit on possibly not having a voice in 5 years' time. And that's actually reality. I've seen that a lot where people accept
I've seen that before. Yeah,
I just take the hit on and ruining my voice, because actually it might not. And that's going to be the thing that's going to get me through. I might be lucky, and I might be someone who doesn't completely screw their voice up. But likelihood you will. I mean, it only goes. I mean, a lot of the time it goes one way, you know. And this is why I think so many teachers, including us, really aim for that efficiency, because as a human with one life, happiness seems to be, however you define that, but at least avoiding pain is a good thing, seemingly in life. So if I'm going to do things that would help me avoid pain moving forward, so that's when we come in with, well, let's work towards an efficient voice. Across the board, you're going to be way happier in your life, even if then you didn't go on and sell your songs. But it's back to that again. I just feel that if you do get that voice that works well for you, and you have a real great connection with it, positive connection with it, because it's working well, it definitely does supersede anything else. But with that though, within your goals and things, is there anything you've worked on recently, or in fact, a better question would be, is there anything that you work on commonly with your students, where there's a certain issue that students would have that you generally would go to a similar tool to help improve that? And also a good question is there anything amongst those singers that you could classify as being similar? The reason why I ask is because if there's anybody listening that thinks, yeah, that's me actually, and yeah, I have that Okay, Annie's given me a tool here to fix this thing. Let's see if it works. Do you have anything on that basis?
Yeah. So if I was to take the thing that is, I call them usual suspects, right? And breath is a usual suspect, not because of like breath is everything and all things, but there is a situation in the body is when a voice is struggling, it could be struggling because you've got a cold. It could be struggling because the way you're thinking about singing is a little bit off and it's causing your voice to be used in a way that's actually not sustainable, right? That's a problem with conceiving singing or imagery, right? It could be a heavy workload, too much for you right now, and it's causing your voice to get tired and inflamed, right? All of those things trigger changes in breathing because breath has to accommodate the vocal cords. So if the vocal cords become inflamed, they tend to require more pushing to get them to vibrate. That's a known fact, right? Or if they are puffy, they have imperfect edges and air comes through more, it leaks more air through. So you tend to find you lose more air more quickly when the vocal cords are inflamed, and that's going to trigger a change in breath. So whether we believe breath is everything or not, what we see in vocal problems is still breath shows itself, it adapts. And if it adapts in a big way, let's say the singer recovers from the inflammation, the cold, or the whatever that was bothering them goes away, it may have been around long enough for their breath to have changed perpetually for good. It's almost like it's become its own habit. It was triggered by a short-term problem, and now it's become a long-term habit. And singers have a lot of trouble understanding what the heck is going on. A classic scenario, if this is you, it would be, I had this cold weeks ago. My voice seems okay, but my singing has not been the same since. Right? Really, really common.
Really common.
So one of the most common, and this is every experiment I do, it's like 70% of singers, right, who aren't just dealing with the basics of singing, but generally can get through a song in pitch. Nothing crazy difficult, but generally can sing a song from beginning to end in pitch and in time, right, and without losing their voice. When they raise their arms above their head, it usually has an effect on them in some way. Sometimes that is a negative effect, but most of the time, 70% of cases, when that person raises their arms above their head, they say, oh, my voice feels a lot easier. Things are just a lot less rough. Things are a lot, my high notes are just a bit easier, right? It just feels nicer. They can describe lots of different things. And that's because when we raise the arms above our head, I call it reaching rather than raising. This is raising, right? Posture is not going with it. But when we reach, it's the whole body, right? So the whole body goes up. And the arms just influences the ribs out. And when the body has got into that habit of pushing against a problematic voice, and the problematic voice is now recovered, but the pushing remains, this is what helps singers out of it almost straight away.
And why is that?
Because the ribs being open, that puts the brakes on pushing, because ribs and belly, they usually need to squeeze to push the air out. But it's a lot harder to compress on the ribs, to squeeze on the ribs when your arms are up, because the pecs and the lats and all the muscles that are connected to the shoulder, you've got to do that to squeeze on them, right? So when you do this, you kind of pull them out of the game a little bit. And then the ribs, because of the connection, they open. So that puts brakes on pushing. And whenever that happens, it means that airflow or air pressure that might just have been a bit forced before, it tends to calm itself down a little bit. So one of the most common things, it's the first assessment I do with every new singer I meet, or every singer who hasn't seen me for a while and has a trouble. Let's just stick your arms above your head just to check. Maybe body's got into a pushing
Is that
situation.
generally people that you would perceive as being or assess as squeezing?
It's not. Yeah, sometimes squeezing. Yeah, sometimes squeezing. Rough tone for sure, because rough tone can be like really pushing breath out. Often the voice sounds wonderful, but it's actually just not feeling great. Didn't feel as nice as it felt before. That kind of report. And sometimes it's functional, as in I used to be able to sing to A just fine, and now I can't get past F sharp or something, right? So either way, there's something going wrong. But if there's something going wrong and you can measure against it, tone cleaner, that's a measure. Yes, my tone improved. I noticed that. Oh, yes, we're up to G, not F. Oh, my range is extending. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And, oh, I can sing that whole chorus without cracking on the consonants. Oh, yes, that's, it's all measurable. And that's where you can go, okay, so how effective do you think that is? And then it'd be like, well, it's pretty effective, right? You know what I mean? So that's, if I was to have no other information about a singer and I wanted to see if something would have an effect, the first and quickest thing I would do is have them stand with their arms above their head, reaching, and then singing whatever it was.
And that could be anyone.
Absolutely anybody.
Right,
So
okay.
it doesn't matter about style.
It's across the board.
It's across the board. It doesn't matter who it is. I've done it with opera singers, so tenors, baritones, sopranos, musical theatre, R&B, pop, absolutely everything. The raising of the arms, if the singer has got into a bit too much forcing of it, it tends to work for the greatest number of people. Not everybody, but if I was going to try and have the highest hit rate with the least effort, that's the first thing I would do. So if anybody's at home and you sing a segment of a song, usually one that's testing you a little bit, not busting a blood vessel, but testing you a little bit, try it with arms down first, baseline, then arms up, and make a comparison, either how it sounds, how it feels, or how it functions. Does it sound better, feel better, or working better?
The problem there, though, is that sometimes it can make them sound worse or feel worse in the moment, right?
Yes.
And that can be a red herring.
Well, yeah, so that's as valuable as it is. So if I was to say, if you were a guy, yeah, if I'm singing that, maybe that's F sharp or F. Maybe it's not even that high, but let's say that the singer has a lot of trouble singing with their arms in the air in a chest voice sound at F. Then it's down, that's the teacher's experience. So if I was to say, that's not reasonable. Okay. If your voice is able to adapt to new environments, it should be possible for you to sing with your arms above your head at F. Maybe other really high notes. Maybe it's like, I accept that might be difficult. But at F, no. At F, there is probably something saying that your voice is actually not happy to adapt. This environment is different. And even though it's different, it's not impossible. And it's not even challenging. But if things are failing, something is struggling to adapt, and that itself might be an injury. It might be a dysfunction, as in muscles have got so bad that they're not changing anymore. It might be that the singer's had such little variety in their lives, they literally can't sing unless the conditions are absolutely perfect. Or they have an image in their head that won't allow this to even exist in the way they sing. It completely obliterates the way they had been singing. So that's where I use that as an opportunity to go, I can then use it as an assessment long term. So as we work on voice and you become more flexible and you can do more things, we'll do this again on F. And likelihood is it be more achievable.
And removing the things that may be in the way.
Yes.
And so is so would you say, when you say that the voice isn't ready to adapt, are you looking at that point with the arms in the air and the sort of breath, the mechanism of breathing is almost taken out of the equation, at least the control we have over that? It's almost saying just do what you do, and the voice isn't responding. Are you looking primarily at the vocal tract positioning and therefore the vocal fold positioning in that moment? Is that specifically what's not adjusting?
Yeah, it could be that. So let's say the vocal cords can't close very well for some reason, so a clear tone could not be achieved. That might be inflammation, or it might be a functional problem. This becomes challenging because when the vocal cords don't close, air comes through quickly. So the demands on breath are actually really high. You have to deliver a lot of air to vocal cords that are open. So this tends to slow air down a little bit, but your vocal problem wants it to be fast. Therefore, it's a clash. And this, when singers literally cannot be anything but breathy or something, this becomes a real horrible challenge. And therefore it's down to we're down to goals, aren't we? It's like, well, if the vocal cords could close easier, this wouldn't be a problem. So it can almost be an indicator as how well the training is going on towards the clear tone, is how easy this starts to become. And if it becomes ultimately easy, you'll probably hear that the tone is probably clearer, because a clearer tone can handle slower breath. you know?
Mm.
So that's how you can use the arms up as like an ongoing assessment as well as a way to look at it now. It's like, is it successful? Great. Use it, bring the arms down, but leave yourself in the upper body posture that it gave you, even the head on the shoulders. You can keep it and then sing, and then you'll keep some of what was good about this, but without having to do this all the time. You could hide this on your technique. Yeah, you can throw your arms up on stage like no one gives a shit.
Yeah.
Unless you're in musical theatre where you absolutely have to do what you're told, right, on cue. You can do this in recording studios to get a great take quickly, right? So I've had people do that before, but ultimately we want to understand its influence on posture and the upper body, and then keep whatever's good about that, but bring the arms down and make sure we're still not military and rigid, but flexible. So that's how those people who are having a positive effect from it can take it forward. But if this is impossible in easy parts of the range or feels horrible in easy parts of the range, that is suggesting that actually voice on a basic level is not willing to adapt. And that's probably going to cause somebody who wants to be professional or wants a voice that will handle a hard schedule. I dare say that's probably going to present itself as an issue.
Right. And so where would we go on that? So let's just say, I come in and I'm like, the sounds, I'm trying to sing somewhere in the middle part of the range, and like that, and we say, we need your arms in the air, mate. So then I do this, and I go, which I think is common, right? In this is that you the squeeze is still there, but we've dropped in pitch. Again, the amount of air that I was allowed to push through to counteract the tension at the vocal level it isn't there, so the pitch is dropped. What would you do?
Well, there's a couple of things. So if there is, the first thing is dialogue. First thing is, tell me exactly how you manage your breath. If you manage it at all, don't manage it at all, or yes, I do it by doing this, that, and the other, right? That has to be on the table. Because otherwise you're figuring around a problem that you don't even know that if there's some singers take things as read. Well, of course I'm doing this. Everybody does that, don't they? I never even said it because I just thought it was taken as read. Have to have it on the table. And equally, voice. Are you trying to do anything with your larynx, or are you trying to do closure, or are you trying to do a sound? Maybe it's twang. What are you trying to do? Because if we change breath, but the voice is not very influenced, for example, they're still squeezing. If you go flat, like what you said, by lowering the breath pressure, you go flat, that's telling you that that person has an extremely strong demand on breath, keeping them in tune, which it can be very unsustainable. It means you'll only be in tune if you push it or you're louder. And that's great if you want to be loud for short periods of time.
Mm-hmm.
But most people don't want to be that because that's not what constitutes a song, right? It has a dynamic. And it's also not constitutes a set. Really loud singing through a set and squeezing and pushing is like most people will get burned by that in fatigue. Only the genetic outliers can survive it sometimes, right? So if there is a flattening of pitch and there's more squeeze, yeah, it's saying that, oh my God, those vocal cords, they're demanding lots of breath pressure. And when you take it away, things get worse. That for me refines it down to what's going on at the voice.
Mm-hmm.
And usually what's going on at the voice, usually in the head. It's the sound they wish to create.
Interesting.
And it needs to be, they might be like just trying to make a strong sound, just trying to make sure it's bang on. They're all red flags for me.
Mm.
And we can use movement not then to affect things that are actually functional. I'm not saying I'm going to use movement for your breath and posture. Now I'm going to use movement to completely distract you from those goals. And
The goal of the vision of the sound you wanted to create, which is causing you a problem.
Yeah. Almost make it difficult to impose it, and always along with that, if we're going to turn the head like this, for example, the instruction is always accept the sound that it gives you. Don't impose anything onto it. If this makes your voice like that, accept it. Even if it's crap, even if it will never fit in the music, accept it. Because there will be something to discover in how you accept it. Right. And to understand that when you accept the sound that the movement gives you, now you're bringing yourself back to a baseline. Now you're going, oh, my body's capable of a clear tone without me having to even think about a clear tone. All I've got to do is distract myself from the beliefs that I had about what I need to sound like. And movement is excellent for that. That's when you just don't worry about what it's doing to the muscles, but really what it's doing to that person's image. Right. And so, yeah, when it comes to that, that's how I would look at that problem.
So what you're saying there is that if there's a singer that is having problems with, it's indicating that there's some squeeze happening in their voice, you would start with arms in the air, like you just don't care, and then once you afterwards, the number of things could happen when they do that if they try this same line of the song, and we said there's a strong likelihood that they might have more squeeze or they might come under the pitch. It doesn't mean this is going to be the fix. It doesn't mean that this is going to solve all of their worries. If they do come under the pitch, it indicates that there's some adjustments need to be made elsewhere. And then you said, off the back of that, where you would tend to go is then using distraction, bodily movements to distract or disassociate the habits that the singer might have had in place that was causing them to use their voice in that way. And that could be as simple as, I've always thought that singing on this particular note in my range should feel like it does when I sing in chest or when I sing low. So therefore, I create that shape. But and then you want to just disrupt everything they're doing there to see if the voice will just adjust itself, I suppose.
Yeah. When influence is taken out of the way, and the influence of how the singer sees singing, like I try to make my voice this way or that way. And sometimes, the distraction is just an opportunity to take that out of the equation as much as possible and see what's underneath. What's the function of the voice that's capable when there's not as much management of the sound and how it should be. That's really important because that is quite heartening to singers. They can start to realize, oh, I still get a good sound, but I don't have to do very much for it. I just have to be sometimes energetic, or I have to distract myself or reconfigure this idea that I thought singing should be this, when in fact that's not serving me at all. Or it may have come from a time when your voice was having much more difficulty, but you've done loads of work since then, so you have to give yourself a bit of credit. And when you've worked on your voice, maybe you've done exercises or you've done a variety of songs, there will be an element of your voice taking care of itself to a degree because you've given it those experiences over and over again. So sometimes the job of distraction and movement is to help the singers to finally take advantage of what they've worked on and not let the old ways of singing that was patchwork for a system that wasn't working well together. Don't let that continue.
Or
Let
creep
the
back
nervous
in.
system, let the nervous system take a hold. Let it become that new. Habit's not a good word for the new one because ultimately it's flexible, and habits aren't very flexible. But it's a new adaptable, self-sustaining sort of way of doing it. And so, distraction can help us do that. And the arms up for anybody, it's like, it could be squeeze their experience, but it could be any vocal trouble. Tonal problems, fatigue, whatever. If it seems to be happening at the vocal folds and we could take the stress off them a little bit, then the arms up is probably going to work.
So depending on what the actual issue is originally, that's really where most of the value comes in seeing someone, such as yourself, is that is what happens next. What happened in my particular situation and my circumstances based on what I'm doing. And that's really not something, I suppose, with all these podcasts we do and the courses people produce online, I suppose the thing that most people are looking for is the thing that's going to fix me, the thing that's going to, the one thing that's going to make everything better. But I suppose what we're saying here is that there possibly isn't something that's that clear. And it's actually exploring some topics of topics within. I mean, it may be similar to some of the direct tools that people are using, but I see from you, it's more about the singer getting closer to their voice, having a better relationship with it, understanding things, the feelings, and then playing within those areas. And that can be, I guess, that's what can be hard for a singer to sort of like, well, what am I supposed to bloody do? What am I? Give me the one thing to do. You're saying it's malleable and it really isn't you really can't give a quick fix. You can't give a
No, not really.
directive.
No, but with the arms up, for example, like if you were going to take that into a play environment, like you can have the arms up constantly there. You could have the arms up as a movement, so it'd be like or whatever. So it could be the arms moving up with the pitch, which is avoiding you pushing out just the high notes. So we're taking this single concept, it's a principle, that the arm position affects the ribs and that affects breath. And if we understand how that affects the voice, then we can actually take this thing and go, oh, maybe I'll put it up, maybe I'll put it out. Still arms effect on ribs. It still rationalizes why some people, when people squeeze their arms that way, it still has an effect of opening out the front of the chest. But we could have the arms moving, then they become distraction. I call it a Mexican wave sometimes. You know what I mean? When you're helping someone to belt, they go whoa, and then they suddenly create this like really loud sound, but it's not like by that. It's not like a crushing sound. We can repurpose the arms up in so many different ways. And then sometimes it's like then arms up, but in motion. So swimming, then we could do it on certain voice qualities. So people would probably notice if you do it on breathy, it will be a pain in the arse. If you do it on strong or clear, it seems to help your body balance breath pressure. So we can change voice quality, pitch range, intensity, static arms or moving arms. That's where you bring all of how many different parameters can I bring into this? And then it becomes play. Then it becomes combos. Things work, things don't. Therefore, I get a much better idea of how my voice works and what this playground is and what I could use it for then that's where the opportunities emerge, because you understand all of the pitfalls and the pleasures with it. And from that, you can craft out like a journey. So that's one of the ways where I can help singers to understand it's not that overwhelming with a tiny bit of advice of, how could I play with this? What could I adjust within it, and how can I help that understand me to move forward and eventually find something that actually I could use right now? That's how I would play with that.
Which fundamentally revolves around a lot of body movement and in different ways and at different time in different speeds and everything like that to disrupt, as you said before. So with that said, though, I mean, just trying to gain clarity in this singing learning world. Is there anything that you would give newer teachers that are just starting now? Hard to say because everyone comes into it with different perspective, reason for doing it, the skill level and experience and knowledge base when they start. Is there anything that you, after how many years you've been doing this, you would say to someone, this would serve you well if you were to think this way, or as a teacher, or um, adopt this mindset in lessons that you're teaching? Is there anything there?
Yeah, it could be if we keep on the same vein of what we've kept on, is that because your body and your singing system, it's made up of so many different systems that depend on each other. That's the main reason why there is no one way to do anything, right? Because as different systems might be different, like you can't just say to everybody, you've got to stand this way. Because how that person has lived the rest of their whole lives up until now may allow them or not to stand in the way you want them to stand. You're not going to change that in 2 minutes, and it's certainly not worthwhile banging on about it, right? So you're going to have to
Are you
accommodate.
talking specifically there about, let's just say, someone who, you'd walk into a lesson and the singer's like this, and they've got, I mean, they might even have scoliosis, but the neck is not aligned as it should be as a singer, and in years gone by, it would have been, you need to stand straight, you need a bit back against the wall. Is that what you mean? We
Yeah.
may not have to chase that if there's other things you can look at.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So let's say, yes, or somebody who's done a sat down job for 12 hours a day for the last 20 years, right? And you know that that's going to have an effect on their voice. But so you can't just impose posture and a particular posture, and that's sometimes what one of the criticisms of some ways of teaching is, that it's like you have to stand this way or you have to breathe this way. Some ways of breathing will not suit somebody who sat down at the piano as well as it would somebody stood up. So are you disempowered then by that person's playing of an instrument? Because it doesn't, then now your breathing techniques don't work for that one. They work better for this one. Your recommendation would be, can you just stand up for a few of those songs? Right? No, I can't. I'm playing the fucking piano. Right? But then we have to go, well, if I can't optimize what I want to optimize in terms of posture or whatever, how can I make changes elsewhere in the system? And maybe it is to do with, like, I have to make sure the vocal cords are really happy to deal with that situation. If standing has the best breath that you find for people, and it's hard to find that when you're playing an instrument that doesn't allow you to fully open, you're going to have to change the voice situation to actually be happy to function with the breath that is possible. And so whenever we look at that, that's why we want to look at, for teachers, it is really about getting a wide input and a very flexible idea of how you achieve something, right? Because if you do embark as a teacher on a method to begin with, like we said earlier, it's a good structure to start with. But if you've got the idea that there is no one way to do anything, then you can just be very flexible in how you approach people and start to learn what the parameters are in each part of the system and how they all fit together. So yeah, if I was to give that advice to new teachers, I just say that you can put things together in such varied combinations that if you keep that with you, that's going to avoid you getting stuck into one way of doing something, and therefore getting into that sort of head fuck of when it doesn't work for a bunch of people and it does some others. And it feels very plateau-like when that happens.
What do you say to the thought that, so on the one hand, being open and flexible and adaptable, almost in some ways, some people describe that as a generalist teacher, and then over here you've got the but is there a case where a teacher could specialize and they could have a method that worked very well for a certain type of singer, at a certain time with a certain issue? Uh, is there value in both? What, in your opinion, is better? Is it better to have specialists who can help a certain demographic, or is it best for everyone to be a bit of, well, I can adapt to every sort of singer in every situation?
Yeah, well, I mean, so let's say that I end up being a generalist because of the amount of vocal coaches I train. So it's nothing to do with my singing clients. In fact, when I teach singers, I tend to be the specialist, as in I do very similar things week to week, right? Like I said before, that's partly because of the people that contact me are quite a similar demographic, right? Usually pros, but I don't exclude any level in my studio, right? But it tends to be the pros that contact me. But when I get into my teacher training, the teacher training has to accommodate that teacher over there has been teaching classical singing for 20 years and wants to teach pop. This singer over here has been a function singer for 15 years and is actually in their first year of teaching. This person has learned speech level singing. This person has learned still. This person has learned CVT. This person doesn't believe anything. This person hates science. This person trusts science a little bit too much, doesn't trust their own instincts. When you put all that into the melting pot, if you're not a generalist, fucking hell, it's really hard to help people. Because the first thing you can't do is you can't understand why they're doing what they're doing. Because if you don't generalize and sort of expand your experiences, you also can't empathize. You can't really say, I totally get why you do that. And I totally get how that would work for these people. That takes a generalist knowledge to do that. And equally, here's how that could be adapted over here for the people who it seems to be falling apart on, or it just seems to hit a brick wall with, right? Generalist style. With classical, in terms of resonance and breath, it's like, oh, I totally get that for classical. I have to understand classical to a degree and be a generalist, even though I never teach it. I've had to teach classical teachers loads. And what they do as well, they bring clients in for me to help them with. So we teach them together. So I, again, have to be a generalist in
So
that
is that
sense.
so what level though? Because is that a generalist in terms of knowledge base, or a generalist in terms of the tools and methods that you use? I suppose they're two different things, aren't they? And it's what seems to be, tell me if I'm wrong, but it seems to be being a generalist in terms of knowledge base is a good thing. Is probably more practical and optimal for that generalist knowledge base to then be funneled into. I'm talking wider picture here
Yeah.
across the world. Because there are so many singers across the world and everyone has access to everyone these days, that general knowledge base is that if I see someone, I've got experience in seeing many different genres, but actually, if you've got this particular issue, I can help you because the method is specialized.
Mm.
My approach is specialized on these particular issues for these particular people.
Yeah.
But knowing where they're coming from, the empathy to know where people are coming from and the experience of working with them is valuable. Have I made that too sort of there's too much granularity in that, or do you think
Not,
that's
I mean, yeah, I mean, if I can zoom out
yeah?
quite easily from that. Yeah. Is that, yeah, the generalism in terms of teaching teachers and the generalism in terms of understanding a lot of about a lot, or a bit of about a lot at times, so that I can help singers from any background and teachers from any background at least get themselves onto some sort of positive pathway. And then that always goes on. If you keep the cooperative aspect and the exploration, again, the problems of specialism don't come in as early. You can keep people on the pathway, right? Because I'm not teaching a way of doing it, a specific thing for most of the improvement in voice. Most of it is just is a general aspect of improvement. If you improve basic aspects of how breath functions with voice and how resonance can support it and how the brain imagery and music works, most people are moving forward for quite a long time. But then there comes a point when my specialism comes in, because that's what I believe.
Mm.
I believe when someone, which is usually with the pro singers, looking for a stronger voice without shredding themselves, that tends to be a specialism that gets selected for me by the clients that come to me. That has focused my efforts on how to teach people to call effectively. And if they can't go, yo, without roughing themselves up, I believe that's going to come a cropper.
Mm-hmm.
So I use particular ways, or the ways that I've found across 15 years, the ways that I find most reliable, right? Of which I am still flexible, but it's most reliable. As I said to you earlier, the closed vowel and how they actually do affect or help to thicken the voice. Moving from there to open vowels, yo would be a good word, like I just did then. It's such a great way to use the closed mouth head voicey vowel, but which actually is chest voicey, as I explained earlier. Using that as the onset, we're hiding it in the consonant. E becomes yo. We're hiding it in the consonant, so we're setting up that voice to be thicker. And then we're using the open vowel to produce the call sound. And it's much more stepwise, that process, but that would be a very basic explanation as to how I approach calling. And if someone can call effectively, I feel like they can access their strong sounds efficiently, more effectively as well. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But that also accommodates those people who I can't belt because I never raise my voice. Right. Which is where the beginners come in. Can I repurpose that? Which is I usually use on professionals who are shredding themselves a bit. Can I repurpose that for the beginner? Yes, because beginners, the way I've worked with them, a lot of them are shy, and that's why they're a beginner, because they haven't developed the confidence to do it. That therefore their speech often and their way of living is not very amped. They're not very expressive, and they're not really loud people often, but they really desire to make a loud sound. It's like almost a fascination.
Mm.
And helping them to do the same thing through the same means, sort of, you can still repurpose it, because ultimately everybody lives on resonance. Resonance supports every voice. So if you invest in resonance training, you are able to help to a point at the start every singer. Same with movement. Everybody starts with the body and everybody lives on resonance. When you start getting past that, and vocal cords, when you start getting past that, then it starts to become a little bit more selective about who it's going to work for. Do you know what I mean?
And just to clarify for anybody that's weirded out by that, the resonance is the outcome. So you're talking about consistent production of resonance, because that's a good thing for many reasons. But that is an outcome of some decisions or choices being made within the vocal tract with the supply of air and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So without, say, let's say if we didn't use a particular exercise that could itself leverage resonance, it tends to be, if you want to be loud or louder, if resonance isn't serving at that point in time, you'd have to leverage the other things. And that is squeezing the voice together to produce a bit more intensity. Certainly breathiness ain't going to do it, is it? It's got to be more closure. And or more breath pressure. Higher breath pressure usually equates to more volume. So when resonance isn't serving, squeeze and push come into play. So we can use resonance as a way to wean people off squeeze and push, so that we share the volume between the systems, not just lumbar breath and voice with it, but put some on resonance as well. And then you can get to high volumes without high fatigue.
So finding resonance and training other notes, vowels, and things like that with wherever you can find resonance, you almost find it and hold on to it
And follow it, yeah.
and transition to whichever thing doesn't include resonance currently.
Yeah,
the plan.
exactly. Yeah, and walk it in. That's where, like, calling again, like throwing the baby out of the bathwater. If you shout a lot, which we see as open mouth, yeah, like that kind of thing, yes, it probably is going to tire somebody out, right? But what we do in calling, yo, it does seem very much like shouting, but it's not the same. It has an element of strategy about it, and planning initially, right? So when you follow a resonance, it can still support you, even though it looks like some of the problems you may see. Some singers do the same thing. They open their mouth a lot as they go higher, and it's their problem. But other people who are leveraging resonance, it ends up being their solution. But as long as they don't over leverage squeezing on the voice and pushing their air, they can open their mouth and follow it like a call, no problem. They can take it way past chest voice normally finishes, no problem. It's all about making sure that the whole system isn't overcooked. And I believe in my bias, right, that is a really, really useful skill, right? But one that old pedagogy, not old pedagogy, but actually maybe traditional stuff of 20th century, that people have been trained out of that ability because of fear of injury. They haven't learned how to call, they've just avoided it.
There are a number of things there that make that call happen. Engagement. This is engagement. Very hard to explain what that engagement is. A number of muscles within the body that are recruiting a certain amount of airflow that's driven towards some vocal folds and a vocal tract that are going to adapt in a certain way. So it's obviously the complication of singing, but that engagement can be a huge part of it that is missing if people don't ever access that particular activity of yelling or shouting.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I like to call it calling, but it's often about facing demons, not avoiding them, and figuring out, but how do other people do that all day long and not get hurt? You know, some of it is genetic, some of it is, well, they're an outlier, so they could do it with the worst technique in the world and not get burned, and that's a genetic advantage. But the great majority of people have just not worked out how to do it without shredding themselves. And I believe that through specifically resonance and learning how to not over leverage the other two things, and one of the insurances is movement. That movement allows us to not overdo it in some way or over strategize it, but make it more spontaneous. That's where I believe that I can get people into a situation where they can create a loud sound without burning.
Fantastic. I think you've got a great method.
Thanks. Don't call it that.
So lastly, I guess we better wrap things up because what did we say, an hour for this?
Yeah, overdone it a bit. This is normal for us though, isn't it? This is normal. Just a quick call, mate. Fuck.
Yeah. 2 hours later, literally. The bonus question, which it would be great to ask every singer across the lands, because it seems to cause some disruption. Sh- should all singing teachers be able to sing?
Oh, you've hit me. The short answer is yes. Singing teachers, they should sing. I think that the joy of being a singing teacher, the joy of being in music, it's nice if you have that joy yourself. It really is. Just on so many levels in terms of energy, it's pretty cool. And I'm not saying you have to be Beyonce. Like, you don't have to be some like virtuoso or anything. But when it comes to certain elements, what I notice in teachers is a lot of the imposter syndrome in teachers is because of their own singing. Because sometimes that is the unnecessary pressure of having to be amazing when you actually just need to be good enough at certain things, basic stuff. So some of the pressure they feel is actually, I think they could probably work to just try and say, well, that is what it is, and I'm happy in myself. But there is a large group of teachers as well who genuinely feel, and I agree that there's an element of vocal demonstration that they feel they should need to do, and they can't do it because they haven't learned themselves. And so I do strive in, without any judgment, is to allow singing teachers to explore that, right? Because there's no better confidence really than being able to do it. But just doing it, as we know from singers who attempt teaching, just doing it is not nearly enough, because then it's only their own bias guiding what they think, how they think you produce it. But when you work with a lot of singers, you realise that's out the window, right?
And your tools are limited.
And your tools are very
You've got
limited.
demonstration. That's
Yeah.
all you got.
So it doesn't work like both directions, right? But singing teachers who are able to sing in certain ways and achieve, let's say, certain technical goals, their confidence and security in their own job, it is so much better. So I say it partly for that reason. It does really help when it comes to things like style and guiding people. Some people just absolutely need you to make the sound first. So it helps if you can do something basic, but it's not necessarily like you have to do everything. Otherwise, sopranos should never teach a bass, and a baritone should never teach a mezzo, because they can do things the other can't. But we know that we know that's not true. That singers get a great deal of value, especially when the teacher is invested in their knowledge of principles, and they have. It's not sufficient to have 20 years experience, right? If that 20 years experience is the same fucking day for 20 years, right? That's not my line, by the way. That was from someone called Michelle, which I think is just a fantastic line, because it's 20 years experience is 20 years of variety. That's what 20 years experience is. So if you're a teacher, if you don't necessarily sing the way that person wants to sing, but you've got a very rich amount of experience that isn't the same day for 20 years, the same method for 20 years, then you will have a much easier time teaching people to do things that you might not necessarily do exactly. That might be somebody teaching somebody else to do like whistle voice or something, right? But myself, there are things that I can't do that I absolutely tap out of. Whistle voice is one of them. I just say, I'm not your man. Okay, because I'm so detached from that experience that I'm happy saying, I won't teach you that. I don't know how. I'd rather you went to somebody who knew how. So there is an element of, there are parts of the way that I sing, or the way that I don't, that I absolutely defer out. You know what I mean? But I think on a basic level, singing teachers should put aside some time every week to work on how they produce sounds without the pressure of being absolutely fantastic. And I guarantee it will improve your teaching. But if anything, the epidemic out there with singing teachers is not always the technique, but it's the feeling of confidence. And when I whittle it down, it's so often it's the way I sing. So, improve your happiness and reconnect the joy of singing. Put aside that time to just do something.
Oh, that sounds like a good place to end.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, so we might not get to do that again. We might not get to do this again ever. But that'd be a sad thing. Maybe not, because people will listen to this and they may go, "Yeah, it was
I mean,
good."
if cameras didn't have battery lives,
Yeah.
we'd still be here tomorrow, wouldn't we?
Yeah. How we doing? Yeah. But no, thanks, mate. Obviously,
No, I appreciate having me.
it's so cool to reconnect and talk about the things that have been going on inside your head for the past 7 years, and because we all just go off in our little worlds and get fixated with things, and to hear a new perspective is awesome. So thanks. Well, we'll wrap it up. Thanks a lot.
Mate. Appreciate it.
That was Chris Johnson, my friend, in a way, my former co-host, and one of the teachers who's genuinely shaped how I think about this thing we call singing teaching. What I take away from this conversation is simple. When you go back to principles, how the voice actually works underneath all the methods, you give singers something that they can own. If you're curious whether that kind of teaching fits how you learn, his full profile is at wehelpsingers.com, including his paradigm fingerprint and how to reach him. I'll be back in 2 weeks with another teacher, another paradigm. See you then.